Everybody, this is Whales Only with chart set for the 19th of July. Crossover is as of 000 UTC, so the crossover from the 19th to the 20th. And let's just get into it. And unless noted otherwise, all the data points are from that point in time. Disclaimer, the information displayed in this broadcast is not the cause of peace amounts of FOMO. Whales Only is alone and is not responsible for any losses you may accrue for having weak hands and making the biggest, one of the most epic mistakes in crypto, and that is becoming a wrecked hex seller. Don't be that guy, because it's always a perma bid for hex, but a real one, right? That's what it's all about. So let's get into what an economy is. I was going to start with that. So an economy is defined by its private sector and its public sector. The private sector creates the value. The public sector is there to facilitate civilization, in essence, maintain health and welfare for the community, right? Make sure that beautification is up to standards. You know, all these things that we think of when we think infrastructure. Um, but what has happened is that over time, the public sector has just become more of a drain as it constantly mismanages funds than it does anything else. So it's just important to highlight that we have the control over this aspect. They do not. It's also important to remember that they work for us. We do not work for them. And the issue that we have constantly nowadays across most of the world is that this slice of the pie that belongs to the public sector is becoming increasingly bigger with their consistent reasonings as to why they need to tax people more. Where we can see that they clearly do not, because they can clearly print all the fiat that they need at a beck of a whim. So this is why I go over an economy to start off with, so people can understand that there's more to it than meets the eye, and that they need to do further research so that they can better educate themselves in the best way. So start it just by going back to some of my old macro talk streams where I go over basics of an economy, what central banks are here for, what their role is, what happens when certain things happen that you see in the news. So just go check those streams out, and it'll bring a lot of things to light for you. Let's keep it moving. So here we're going to go into the market cap dominance for the top 100. And this is the chart as of 7/13/2021 at 9:15 hours, or 21 to 15 military times, hours East Standard Time. And here we go to 5% on the 14th, approximately 24 hours later. And we jump again with a change in the chart in terms of format. You guys have been made aware of this yesterday. If you didn't see it on Twitter, well, this is the latest update of this chart where we're just accounting for hex and everything else is clearly just wrecked. And if you don't believe me, just take a look at the crypto market right now. And look at what we have for hex as of, of course, PowerPoint always wants to play games with me. Okay, and that's what we have. I feel like there's a slide missing. What is going on here? All right, guys, back. I needed to throw in a chart there for the pie chart that wasn't in the deck for some reason. And what it is that we're just showing the delta. And this is supposed to show today's date and time, but it doesn't, and that's okay. It's for today. Around, let me think here. I want to say it's probably around 6:30 or something like that. Jeez. Anyway, well, as we can see, the chart has gone up, or the slice of the market cap top 100 for X has gone up from 6.3% to, come on, 7.1%. And this is just okay. I'm sorry, PowerPoint, it just really sucks. And this is just the way that Hex is going to keep eating up the rest of the market, right? Because the value is always going to be had where the value is, not where people think the value lies. Because the market is always going to go to where the capital is always going to flow to where it's treated best. And now we're going to go into the first 582 days live chart, and this is just the first 582 days of Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Hex, and T-shares. And what I've done is laid out the trend lines for the respective charts, price return charts, or price return lines on this chart. We have it for Ethereum and for T-shares. And the important thing to note is that for T-shares, the line is log base 2, whereas for Ethereum it's log base 10. That matters a lot over time, and I'll get into that a little bit further. But for now, let's focus on the fact that BTC index is at 900, basically 901 rounding up on the 582nd day, whereas the Ethereum index is at 1,787 on this index. Hex is at 72,685 rounding up, where T-shares are at 133,984. Now, if you want the percentage returns with respect to the data set we have on hand, you just subtract the 100 from these values, and there is your return in percentage terms. Now, the important thing about these trend lines is they defined the return stream nature, meaning how price is going to move over time. That's essentially what this line is detailing. So, in essence, the longer you hold on to this asset, the more you're insuring yourself to getting paid outstanding sums of money, because it is designed to do that mathematically, and this is what we're seeing here. Please go back to the first few streams that I did. They really break this down in some refined detail there. We'll keep moving here. This is the Hex Pulse Big Payday chart. So what's the Big Payday? Big Payday was a singular event that is similar to Bitcoin halving, where Hex essentially emitted all of its inflation out into the system in one foul shot at a rate of 30%. So this is what we saw here, where price ran up into November 1st and then sold off into the Big Payday, which was November 19th, 2020. And ever since then, this has been the price action we've been seeing up and to the right, to the tune of Hex Big Payday finally reaching or crossing over the 3,000 Hex, 3,000 mark to 3,040, basically rounding up. Whereas the first halving is now at 752, the third halving at 475, rounding up, and the second halving at 177, rounding up. So on a percentage basis, Hex is outpacing the first by 300, the second by 1,416, and the third by 500%. I mean, these are just crazy numbers, and it's just showing how strong Hex is versus the rest. I mean, it's phenomenal, phenomenal. And again, this is just 244 days, so we haven't even seen a full year of price action of the system in its true form. So fun times ahead. T-shares versus Ethereum is a pink line, and then T-shares versus Bitcoin. Now this is in dollar terms, so the dollar value divided by the dollar value. And as you guys can see, T-shares are now 160% of 1 ETH, whereas Bitcoin is, or whereas T-shares are now 9.5% of 1 Bitcoin. And we're just going to keep creating value because that's what the system is constantly doing over time. So that's what we're going to, the data is going to keep showing us just that. So what we're looking at on this chart is the dollar cost of a T-share along with the dollar cost of 10,000 Hex. The dollar cost of a T-share is $2,915.40, where the dollar cost of a 10,000 Hex is $1,580.16, giving us a T-share rate of 18,449 or 18,450 Hex per T-share, basically. And now where does this number come from? This number comes from the dollar cost of a T-share divided by the dollar cost of Hex, 10,000 Hex. So the system is designed to always give us a higher rate over time with every end stake, because it's designed to mimic inflation, and the way it does it is that it accounts for how long you've been in the system staked, and it also takes into account what your ROI is and some other factors, and then it reduces the quantity of your Hex, or I'm sorry, the quantity of the T-shares that you can restake immediately after a stake ends. And that's just a function of time, right? Because the reality is that this rate mechanism is always going up. It's designed to do that because that's the way the function works. And that's through the end staking function. This is what I'm describing right now. When the stake ends, what's happening is that the system is saying, okay, you just ended this stake, but since you first entered this stake, the T-share rate was X back here. Now it's X plus whatever, any number, right? N over here. So your T-share rate is higher now. So you can only get X or Y T-shares, right? And that's a function of the system taking into account the change that's occurred during while that entity was staked. Because over time, the system didn't stay in one place, right? It progressed, creeping up in terms of value. And that's what we're seeing. And now today we had an APY of 44.88%, which is great. And now we're going to get to the payout per T-share sum line, along with the Hex index. And as always, we have a nice 2,378 Hex per T-share paid out to those that have been staked since day one. Hex index is giving us a nice hefty reading, again, still a 72,685 rounding number. And the important thing to remember is that this chart is always going to be chasing value. It's just how it works. So the more payout per T-share we print, the higher the valuation in the system, the higher the price is going to go. And we'll talk about that a little bit again in the future because it's all related to the T-shares as always. Now, if we're looking for the percentage return of this cumulative sum of Hex, that would be this number minus 100. So 216,238 rounding up on the index. And to get the return number, we would just remove 1 from the 2, giving us 216%, 138 rounding up. In percentage terms, for just stake. Being staked, not doing anything, not clicking any buttons. You're just staking one time, and that's it. You're done. Nothing else to look at. Have a nice day. Now we have the payout per T-share sum line, giving us a reading of 616%. What basically this is saying is that the payout per T-share has increased to the tune of 6x at this point in time. It typically fluctuates between 500 and 600, but it mostly stays in the 500 territory, as you can see here, with the line being mostly below those spikes. Daily payout index is at 20,086 or 87 rounding up. And again, this is one that fluctuates between 17,000 and 20,000, more 17,000 and 20,000, as you can see on the chart. But of course, the main thing to note is just how much value has been accrued over time and consistently doled out by the system. Because this is the daily payout index. So this is what the system pays out every day in Hex terms, in a percentage basis. So as of today, at the crossover, we have 6.797 Hex paid out from it to each staker in terms of per T-share. And the daily payout was a whopping 74,453,000 Hex to the system. I mean, this is just crazy numbers, as you guys can see, because this is like elevated now, right? It's like it found support at 6. Like, this is crazy right now. So it'll be interesting to see what happens as the total T-shares as of right now seem to be going deflationary, given that they're, $2,915, getting harder to acquire a T-share, right? So you can see a little slope in the line there, which in conjunction with the with the emergency end stakes that we're seeing due to the price, all of this is a perfect storm for those with graphene hands that don't mind holding on tight. And now we're going to get into the expiring shares chart, or series of charts, excuse me. So what we're seeing here is essentially what I was describing earlier, which is what happens, or which is where the data lies to show how the T-share rate ratchets up. So as we can see here, on the 10th of July, we had a staking percentage for the month of July to being almost 50% at about 47, 48%, right? August is like 20%. September is all the way down here. And this was just 9 days ago. So let's watch the change over time. The 11th, not much change. July dropped a little bit, but nothing major. 13th, July picked up a little bit, nothing major. 18th, though, July drops a lot. And interestingly enough, um, August picks up significantly to the tune of 35, 36%, whereas September picks up significantly as well, right, to the tune of almost a little bit over 15%. And I mean, what's interesting is that the front stakes are getting chunkier now, right? They were kind of flat, kind of devolved before, and then now, in the past couple of days, it's like, oh, well, there's a whole lot of activity for the next 6 months. So, or even almost a whole year. Let's just say 9 months to cut it even. But that's what's going on, right? So this is what's going to drive that T-share rate, because every time a stake ends is accounting for the returns in the T-share rate over time in conjunction with the returns and the fluctuation of the price of any. And the system will calculate such that you get less T-shares the next time around because it's mimicking that compounding function. So now we're getting into the all-time HEX versus ETH correlation charts and all-time HEX versus Bitcoin correlation charts. And I like to talk about them at the same time because they're one and the same. So let's talk about it. What each dot is representing is the simple fact that HEX is on the x-axis, Ethereum and Bitcoin are on the y-axis, and each dot is a plot of each respective return point for each data set, right? The data X and the data Y. In this case, Hex is X and Ethereum and Bitcoin are Y. Excuse me. All right. Excuse me there. So the important thing to note is that given that Hex is on the x-axis, we want to see that the return streams or the returns are positively grouped to the right side of the zero line for the x-axis, and that's what we see versus Ethereum and Bitcoin. Whereas for Bitcoin and Ethereum, both of them being on the y-axis, the returns are much more scattered across, meaning the returns are not positively skewed; they're very varied. Whereas for Hex, they're primarily on the right side of the zero marker for the x-axis, meaning that the returns are positively skewed. And also, please note that we have a zero reading for the R squared in both Ethereum and Hex versus Bitcoin, or Hex versus Ethereum and Bitcoin, excuse me, which lets us know there's no correlation throughout all the data points, no matter what. That's basically what that means. Now, fluctuating wise, it does change over time, positive and negative, but in essence, that's giving us a zero um, reading for correlation because it doesn't stay there. So this chart is a prime example of what a positive or a negative correlation would look like. You have the dollar cost of a T-share, correlation of a dollar cost of a T-share versus the price of Hex. And as you guys can see, the long-term correlation of 55 days that I'm tracking is at 99.98% essentially. Meaning that as long as the dollar cost of a T-share constantly goes up, which we already went over, how the T-share rate goes up. And the T-share rate is merely just what it costs in dollars, right? Or the dollar cost of a T-share is just the T-share rate in dollar terms for the most part, right? And that value is going to fluctuate really versus the dollar, not so much the T-share rate, because the T-share rate is constant. That's the value proposition there. So it's important to realize that difference. All right. So here we have a price of 15.8 cents today. A crossover. Excuse me, guys. Um, yeah. And so, long story short, the more the dollar cost correlation stays to 1, the higher this bad boy is going to go because end stakes are always going up. They're never going down. So anytime somebody ends a stake, whether it's early or not, the T-share rate is going to be ratcheted up and right. And the higher, I'm thinking the higher we go up in value, the more emergency and stakes we're going to see. And that's what we've been seeing lately ever since we hit above that 10% mark. We've just been, well, really above that 5% mark. We've just been getting a whole lot of emergency and stakes. All right, now this is the dollar this is basically the dollar value chart for Hex payout per T share and the adjusted Hex value, which is just really the Hex plus payout per T share sum. And as you guys can see, we have Hex price of 15.8 cents today, which with a payout of 979, I think it was 797, gave us a dollar cost for the payout per T-shirt today of greater than $1 at $1.07, which gives us an adjusted Hex value of $1.23. Now, this means that's where we're going in the future. As you guys can see, we already hit 20 cents, which was all the way back here. Oh, I'm lying. Where are we? Yeah, all the way back here, right? This is 20 cents. All right, guys. So this is just again, tracking value, right? And these lines, the yellow and pink lines, are just leading indicators. And we've hit the 20-cent area so far. And I think it's just a matter of time. And again, this is just my opinion before we hit 35, maybe 50 cents, because that's where value has built itself over time. And what we end up seeing is that wherever price does that, price typically goes there and rests. So we are still, I think, in the midst of a pump to this level, 30, 50 cent level. So we'll see how it goes. These are just leading indicators, and price gets there when it wants to. So here we have the Hex price to earnings ratio at a crazy 14.7%, versus the all-time low 551% for the S&P 500 earnings ratio, price to earnings ratio, which occurred in December of World War I, right? So this is over 100 years ago at this point. I mean, really, in the highest appreciating asset in human history, you're gonna have a 14% Hex to P ratio. Phenomenal value that's never gonna be seen again. And as you guys know, we're getting up there in terms of price, so we're eventually gonna break out of here sooner rather than later. But we're still somewhere around here. But let's not forget how the ROI is determined, or the APY is determined for those that are staked. It is a function of the coin staked of the total supply, and right now we're at 9.54, 9.55%, right around there. So with all the emergency and staking that we have going on now, it's no surprise that we're above 40%, 42% in the APY consistently lately. And hey, I'm not mad at those that are emergency and staking. It's filling up my bags nicely lately, so keep it up, guys. Thank you for your service, as our man Hodl Dog would say. And that's pretty much all I got for you guys. We could talk about Pulse Chain for a couple minutes just to kind of tighten that up. So give me a second. Let me just pull up the sacrifice site. And let's pull up Pulse Lead. And what we got is 29 million so far for the top sacrificer, right? And the bottom 100, I think it's 500,000 at this point. It gets higher every time I look. 586,000. This is what I'm talking about, right? Even if you have a million or whatever, even if you're a whale, right? I understand you thinking when matters, but no, it's the what. And why is that? Well, let's take a look. It's important to realize that what you sacrifice is what matters and what determines your points. If someone adds, let's see, where is the line? Yeah, where is it? All right, guys, so here we go. It's basically this part. Now, all the points stand up and head to the changing room in the same order they entered the auditorium. The first point enters and out comes 2.5 points, all wearing the same sacrifices address on their shirt. That's the key, right? Because it's accounting for the sacrifices address. So the more that comes out of that single address, the more points that are going to be awarded in terms of USD value. So it's not necessarily the win. It's how much you sacrifice. So unless you're able to just drop 30 million, right? you're pretty much priced out of the 2.5 bonus multiplier. But the thing to remember though, right, is you're still going to attain some type of multiplier as long as you're not the smallest, right? Because at least you're going to get 1x or up, right? Which isn't bad, right? That's automatically 100% on what you're getting just from the US dollar value. So that's a pretty good deal in my book, right? Because you haven't even done anything and you're already getting 100% of what you're putting down in terms of points, right? Because for every dollar that you put in, you get a point, right? So if this is crediting you 1x for that point, that means 2 points, right? So US dollar value, guys, that's the critical aspect of the sacrifice phase here. We are ending day 5 for that 2.5x multiplier for the top sacrificers in approximately an hour and 21 minutes. But important to remember, somebody can just come in and drop 50 million, right, at the end of the sacrifice phase. And this person just lost their top spot at 2.5, and they're going to get a little bit less. So that's the nature of the beast. That's what I wanted to talk to you guys about. And that's all I got. So thank you guys. Let's not forget about our beautiful hex here. But we also have this phenomenal pulse chain that's going to allow hex to thrive. So it's going to be a beautiful symbiotic relationship where all hexagons and soon to be hexagons are going to benefit. And the whole crypto space, or excuse me, the promise coin space is going to learn to get right on that chain. So good times ahead. Hexagons set the standard. Let's not forget it. And let's continue doing what we're doing, guys. Pleasure as always.